My name is Fernando Ramirez. I am originally from Mexico. When I was 9 years old, one night that seemed like any other, I went to sleep without imagining what was about to happen. In the middle of my dream, something extraordinary happened. I woke up and before my eyes I saw what changed my life forever. I say the truth. In Christ I do not lie. I repeat with full confidence and a clear conscience each detail that I am going to tell you really happened. I know well that the scriptures warn us that liars will not enter the kingdom of heaven and that their destiny will be the lake of fire that burns with sulfur. With that conviction, I can say that everything I tell is the truth. That night while I was sleeping, an angel entered my room. I saw him with total clarity. He did not have wings and was short. He was less than 2 meters tall and he was wearing a white tunic. I remember how strange it was to see him fly through the ceiling without crashing. He simply went through it as if it were nothing. He took me by the wrist. And in that instant, we flew off together. At first I thought that we crashed into the ceiling and I instinctively raised my hands to cover my face, but we went through the ceiling as if it were air. It was possible that I was in spirit, but at that moment I did not know. For sure the only thing that was clear to me was that I ascended rapidly towards the night sky. When I reached the atmosphere I observed something peculiar, something that I defined as a tornado. Years later when I converted to Jesus I read in the Bible in the book of Job about a whirlwind which made me remember that experience. We headed directly towards that spiral and suddenly everything went out. The darkness was absolute. I could not see anything, not even my own hand. It was then when things began to take a darker and scarier turn. Suddenly I felt an unbearable heat as if millions of ovens were on around me. It was a heat that does not exist on earth, a heat that exceeded any imaginable limit. My mind, even being that of a child, tried to process what was happening. Confusion and fear. Where was I? Why was it so hot? All this was impossible to bear as the heat overwhelmed me. My recurring thought was, why don't I die? But if I was already in the spirit I couldn't die anymore. We continued descending despite the intensity of the heat. I never stopped feeling the hand of the angel holding my wrist. We were going down but I couldn't see anything, just absolute darkness. In fractions of a second time seemed to have accelerated and everything that lived was processed much faster than in the physical world. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, almost as if it were tar, that black material that is used to repair the streets. I tried to inhale but in each breath the air burned me inside. I barely managed small gulps of air which only increased my anxiety. It was a constant struggle because each attempt to breathe was accompanied by an unbearable pain, as if a thick, black substance that was entering my nose burning me inside. Terror enveloped me almost immediately. I don't think more than 10 seconds had passed when I began to feel a deep anguish mixed with a suffocating anxiety. I did not understand where I was or what was happening. The heat was still unbearable and the lack of air aggravated the panic. The fear I experienced was so intense that it seemed to go through my bones. However, despite everything, that firm hand that held me by the wrist never let go. We continued to descend more and more while the heat intensified. Oh, I remember that the pain in my feet was the most unbearable. It was as if they were burning, and although I did not understand it at that moment, I now know that God allowed me to feel only a fraction of the real suffering that is experienced in that place. He attenuated the pain so that I could endure it and learn from that experience, because in my adult life I would understand the mission that awaited me. I had to tell what I lived. At that time I had no biblical knowledge. I was just a child confused by what was happening. It was not until years later when I began to read the Bible that I understood that everything I lived was already written in the scriptures. It was a shocking revelation that confirmed the veracity of my experience. As we continued to descend, the pain in my feet became more and more acute and breathing became more impossible. With each second I felt fear and confusion, a sensation so dense that it seemed to completely envelop me. Later, when reading the book of Daniel, the verse that speaks of the confusion that will fall upon men, and I understood that it was exactly what I was living at that moment, an overwhelming confusion from which I could not escape. I could no longer bear the darkness. It was absolute, deeper than anything I have experienced on earth. I remember a night diving course that I took years, in which we dived into the sea at night with lamps to light us. When I turned off the lamp you could not see absolutely anything, as if you were covered with a black cloth. However, that darkness in which I found myself was infinitely denser and terrifying. As we continued descending I heard strange sounds coming from above. They were whistles, but I could not see anything, which increased my panic. The whistles began to increase in intensity, filling the air. I had no idea what was happening. With each passing second the sound became louder, and suddenly I heard something that completely terrified me. The sound I heard was similar to that of a plane breaking the sound barrier. It was a roar so loud that it resonated through my entire being. Shuddering, the roar was so terrifying that many of us jumped with fear. That same sound, but amplified many times, was what I heard. As I descended the noise continued to increase. It came from above and came down with us. The only security I had at that moment was the hand that I was still holding my wrist, assuring me that I was not alone. As I descended further and further a faint red glow began to dimly illuminate the darkness. Although it was barely perceptible, that small flash of light allowed me to see a little of what was around me, and what I saw only increased the terror that was already overwhelming me. The whistles that initially came from above now began to be heard from below, mixing with those similar to the sonics booms that I had heard before. Red light that barely let me glimpse my surroundings began to grow, slowly illuminating more of what surrounded me. Little by little the panorama became clearer, and what I saw filled me with an indescribable terror. I realized that I was descending towards what seemed to be the crater of a gigantic size. Everything around it seemed like a deep well, and I continued to go down while the angel held my wrist. The environment was semi-dark because the red light never completely illuminated the place, only allowing me to see fragments of what was there. Even so, the sensations were overwhelming. The lack of air, the heat that burned my body, the fear and terrible confusion that invaded me without knowing what was happening. As the red light intensified, I could see something beyond the darkness. Horrible, deformed monsters about 3 meters tall were coming up from the depths of the well. Their appearance was black and frightening, and from their hands came black arrows. It was then that I understood that those whistles that I had heard were the arrows shot by those creatures. The arrows that had a dark fire-like dart on their tips were directed towards us as if we were intruders in that place. Although those arrows did not reach us, they passed by us and ascended towards the surface. Suddenly in my mind I received a revelation. These black arrows went up to the earth, causing all kinds of tragedies, divorces, murders, kidnappings, abortions, drug addiction, among other evils. It was a quick information download, and it became clear to me that these arrows were responsible for the darkest acts that occurred in the world. I also understood that the prayers of Christians could stop them. Millions of arrows ascended from the well, but the prayers of the saints acted as a shield blocking it, ignited by the evil one that could only be stopped with the shield of faith. As I had witnessed in that experience, then before my eyes I saw something even more terrifying. Giants, demons, the same ones that shot the arrows, began to rise to face us. I felt a deep fear, but right at this moment the red light revealed something else. Those rumblings that I had previously compared to warplanes turned out to be legions of angels. They were descending at full speed to fight the demons that were rising from the pit. Someone told me that the Father had sent those angels to allow me to see the entrance to hell. I will try to describe those angels that I saw in combat. They were legions of war angels that were descending from heaven with us. Although I had not realized their presence until that moment, I was not alone, and those angels were there to face the demons that tried to block our path. In a fierce battle the angels collided with the creatures that were coming up from the pit of the abyss, throwing them back into the depths of abyss, allowing me to see the entrance to hell. The angel who held my wrist finally spoke to me in hell. I watched as the angels and demons fought each other, and I saw clearly that spiritual warfare was real, something that I fully understood when I became a Christian. Spiritual conflict is not a symbolic or metaphorical matter, it is a literal battle in which the angels of God fight against the spiritual evil in the heavenly regions. I could see how the angels and demons hurt each other. The combat was real, and the swords they carried caused damage. The demons also managed to hurt the angels, although the angels with their superior number managed to advance. It was an intense combat, and each blow, each clash was tangible and true. I saw how the demons also managed to hit the angels as if they were in a real battle. The more angels descended, the faster the scales tilted toward victory. However, the black arrows that the demons shot were not only directed at us but also at the angels. These arrows hit some of them, causing them to spin in the air like fallen animals falling in a spiral, but immediately more angels arrived to reinforce the battle, which made the scene even more shocking. These angels of war that I will now try to describe, they were like we imagined them on earth in the spiritual world. Everything is different, much more faster, as if the information was downloaded to you instantly and you immediately understand what you are seeing. Although at that moment I did not always fully understand what was happening, each one of these angels was approximately 5 meters tall and wore armor reminiscent of that of the ancient Roman soldiers, but their breastplate was made of a black metal, a material that I could not identify. They seemed immensely strong and their wings that extended up to 6 meters were majestic. What caught my attention the most was that the feathers of their wings were not soft or like cotton but sharp like the feathers of an eagle. These beings were imposing. All the angels I saw had golden hair and had a gold band on their forehead which further highlighted their presence. Their huge and sharp swords were true combat weapons, but the strangest thing about these angels was the duality in their appearance. They were incredibly fierce with faces that reminded that of a lion, full of power and authority. However, at the same time they gave off an immense tenderness and love towards the children of God. It was a surprising combination. On one hand fearsome warriors and on the other loving protectors. While we continued descending, the battles between the angels and the demons continued with an impressive ferocity. The red glow that continued to illuminate the well allowed me to see even more of what was around us. I saw beings even more horrible than the monsters that were coming up from the bottom of the abyss. These new monsters were chained to the walls of the well, as if they were trapped in cages. Their bodies were stuck to the rock as if they had been adhered with some substance, and they extended their hands through the bars trying to reach me, full of hatred, trying to tear me apart. Thank God the well was so big that their arms could not reach us. However, I could feel the hatred that emanated from them. They did not stop cursing and blaspheming, uttering rudeness incessantly. Later in my life I understood that people who are trapped in a corrupt language, that they cannot stop cursing, they are being influenced by spirits of that place. Those demons flood their thoughts and mouths with curses, replicating what they do in the depths of the abyss. The red glow intensified even more, and what I saw next was absolutely terrifying. A country of torment. It was as if I was flying over this place in a small plane or helicopter looking from above. In the spiritual world the vision is no limits. As on earth you can focus your sight on a specific point, and as if it were a telescope everything opens before you, allowing you to see details that you normally could not perceive. The experience was disturbing and heartbreaking. In the spirit things happened so incomprehensible that it took me more than 10 years to process what I lived. After that experience as a child I decided not to tell anyone. I kept that memory deep inside me without knowing that it was part of the training that Jesus had for my adult life. I did not know at that time that what I had witnessed would be instrumental in my future mission. As the red glow intensified in that country of torment, what I saw was chilling before me. Millions and millions of human beings from all parts of the world speaking in different languages, screaming desperately. Each person suffered in different ways, and the scenes of pain were varied. I will try to describe. Some people looked like decomposing corpses with arms, head and legs, but their bodies were putrefied. They were desperately climbing the walls of that dark place of black stone trying to escape. I saw demons that looked like horrible monsters. They made fun of them. These people not only mocked but also stuck spears in their backs, and the souls screamed in pain. The demons then threw them into pools of fire where the torment continued. It was a vision of suffering without end. One pain after another, desperate screams, fear and agony. I remember having seen a giant dragon about 400 meters tall that was even more terrifying than the other monsters. There were creatures of all types and sizes, but they all shared the same goal, tormenting souls. This giant dragon took souls with its immense claws. It pierced them with it, and the souls screamed in pain. Then with an evil laugh he threw them into the pools of fire. All this was like a horror movie. One scene of despair after another, without escape. I suffered when I witnessed it inside me. I understood something that marked me forever. This is the place where those who die without Jesus go, those who die without repenting, whether living in sin of fornication, adultery, idolatry or any other form of rebellion against God end up here. Although I was only a child, I understood it clearly at that moment. I did not want to be there. My soul wanted to escape from that place, and the suffering was so unbearable that I did not think I could bear it for much longer. The noise was deafening, the constant screams mixed with the wails, and I only longed to have a little peace, but in that place there was no rest. The volume of the screams and the sound of despair was so high that there was no escape. Also the smell was unbearable. A rotten stench filled the air, a smell worse than anything I could have smelled before. It was like when an animal dies and its corpse begins to decompose, but multiplied by millions. Breathing was torture, not only because of the heat but also because of that smell of death that permeated the whole environment. I felt a wave of negative emotions overwhelming me: hunger, thirst, exhaustion, fear, anxiety. Everything was accumulating at the same time. The physical body could not bear such sensations. That is why I understood that the souls in that place were trapped in spiritual bodies capable of resisting the continuous torment without being destroyed. As I looked around me, I saw different torments. In each direction people were desperately asking for forgiveness. Although I did not understand the languages they spoke, I knew they were praying, begging for mercy, crying out for a second chance. But in that place there are no second chances. The time of grace had passed and their destiny was sealed. On earth we are billions of people, and what terrified me the most when understanding all this is that only a few will be saved. The great majority of humanity will not escape this destiny of eternal torment. However, this is not God's wish. He does not want anyone to end up in this place of suffering. That is why I feel the need to tell this testimony as a warning to humanity. This is the place that Jesus spoke of, where the fire does not go out, where the worms do not die, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. This place is real, and God warns us again and again not to end up there. There is only one way to be saved from this fate: Jesus Christ. He is the only way. Thoughts of confusion flooded my mind as I stood there in the middle of that horror. I could not understand what was happening, and the only thing I wanted was to get out of that place. It was not a dream, I know for sure, because the suffering I experienced was real. I was not calm, I was not at peace. On the contrary, I was terrified, desperate for everything to end. I just wanted to escape. In a moment I felt a tug on my wrist, but this time upwards. Suddenly we began to ascend rapidly. We left that place of the pit of the abyss and entered again into the whirlwind that had taken me there. Suddenly we were back in the atmosphere. We crossed the roof of my house and the angel left me in my bed. Before leaving he told me something that I will never forget: you were a minute in the mouth of hell, and that experience was a terrible day for me. Far from being pleasant or enriching, I did not understand what had happened to me, and the impact was so strong that I buried that memory in the deepest part of my mind for many years. I did not want to think about it. However, when I was about 17 or 18 years old, while studying at the university, God sent someone to preach the gospel to me. That was the moment when God spoke to my life, and I believed in the message of salvation. I repented of my sins and gave my life to Jesus. I began to read the Bible every day, and what happened next left me speechless. That memory that I had buried in my subconscious, the one that I tried so hard to forget, was brought back to my mind by the Holy Spirit. When I began to read the Bible, I realized that everything I saw in that place was written in the scriptures. I finally understood what had happened to me. For example, when I read the book of Judas, I understood that there is a group of angels who did not keep their dignity and who abandoned their heavenly home. These angels were locked in eternal prisons under darkness, awaiting the judgment of the great day. In my experience, I saw both loose demons and imprisoned demons. Before, I did not understand why some were free and others were not. But the letter of Jude explained it clearly to me. I also read about darkness and other passages that coincided with what I experienced in that place in prayer. I asked God why He showed me such a horrible place when I was just a 9-year-old boy. His answer was, "I don't want them to be lost. I love them. I was training you. Go and tell them that this place exists and that I want to save them." So now, To those who hear this testimony, I make an invitation. Come to the Lord Jesus Christ. Maybe you attend a church, but I ask you, have you been born again?